I call this special meeting of the City Council to order this morning, Tuesday, November 15th at 8 o'clock a.m. We have one order of business on this special agenda, and that item 1A is selection of a search firm and finalization of a process for the recruitment of a city manager. The summary statement, Kim, if you don't mind, I'll just run it down, or you prepared it for us. But just for review, the request for proposal for this engagement was sent out October the 26th. The deadline for all submissions was November the 9th. The 10th and 11th was time for preliminary analysis by council and staff of the search firms. Yesterday, November the 14th, Mr. Andrews, Ms. Summerlin, and staff and I reviewed the four applications, or the four requests for proposals that were received. We had interviews about an hour long with each of the firms. At the conclusion of that, we just discussed the different parameters there, and today we're to present that to the others of you to make a recommendation or to discuss or to answer any questions that you might have. The four firms were Chris Hartung, I think it's LLC, the Slavin Group, the Waters Group, and SGR. So we had interviews with each of them, and I'm going to let the council members who were there make some statements about each of these, if they'd like, before we begin our discussions. Are there any questions?
Well, I would just simply say we had four good proposals. Their prices are very, very close, within $1,000 or $2,000 of each other. There were, in each one, there was something we liked. In the process, I like this this company's process. I wish they had that here, but it really came down. And so, then there was one that was a little far away. We were a little concerned about Slavin Group being in Atlanta and Mesa. It was a larger, seemed to be more of a national search firm, a little less prepared, in my opinion, than some of the rest. Waters was okay, and SGR or SGR has some really good process ideas that we liked, but we felt most comfortable with the one we've used before, apparently, Mr. Hartung. And so I would have been comfortable with two of the four, taking two of the four, but it certainly, for me, it tilted to one very quickly, and that would be Hartung.
For me, it came down to SGR and Hartung as the best. I lean toward Hartung, and his price is $3,000 less for the base price and a lot less for expenses, so that you end up with a difference of $6,000. And I didn't see $6,000 worth of advantage to the more expensive one, so that brought me to choose Chris Hartung too.
I would say that with the Slavin Group, I like the fact that they would have gone on site to interview the candidates. They would have gone and interviewed. That's part of their process that I didn't see in the other three. But having said that, their remote location gave me a little bit of concern. They just didn't have as much exposure in Texas. I believe Mr. Hartung had the most experience placing Texas candidates. I believe he also had come out of the Waters Group, so he has a number of years of experience. He is a one-man show. He does use outsourcing, for the background checks, as do a couple of the others, which I don't find to be problematic. He does seem to be professional in his approach. Mr. Hartung will come up to, I think he said 4, I think Kim said yesterday, but actually in the book it said 6, up to 6 visits that he would make. We had a little bit of concern with the representative that would be the project manager from the Waters Group, simply because of the fact that he didn't have the experience. He was new. He has a human resources background and not a city manager background, and that was a little bit of a concern to us. Mr. Hollifield is the rep for SGR, and I love, as others have mentioned, what all they seem to offer which you've looked at probably in your brochures. However, he's had a little problem lately with the city of Killeen, and we asked him in particular about that, and we weren't real certain of his answer for that, how he answered,
You're being nice,
how
Larry.
he dealt with that situation, primarily in that SGR has a really, really extensive analysis of the candidates, a DISC process, which is very involved, but somehow through all of the involvement of the parameters that they set and the tests they give, there were about 4 really problems that slipped through in the finalist of the last city that they placed. So I guess having said all of that, if there's any questions by the councilman who
Here's
weren't...
another
One
good
other
thing.
comment.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry?
I want to make one other comment. Go ahead.
Okay,
Mel.
another good thing about Chris Hartung is that among his guarantees, and this is unique among the 4, is that he commits not to solicit our candidate for other search assignments while he is, during his tenure in
We got
Kerrville.
3 guarantees.
Yes.
Anytime
Right.
in the next 2 years, if a candidate leaves, we get a free search on expenses.
Yeah.
But that was pretty typical.
Right.
Chris Hartung is the only one that agreed not to recruit somebody we hire for another job.
Well, actually, I think 2 others were committed to that,
did
SGR
they?
and Waters.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
It's a good guarantee.
yes, he had a 3-way guarantee.
And that they will guarantee, and also, I just think in public, it's important to know, if they don't find us somebody in the first round, if we reject all candidates, we get another go, they will keep at it until they find someone. They won't recruit the person they place. And 2 years, anytime in the first 2 years, the candidate leaves, for whatever reason, they get another research for price, for cost.
Expenses, yeah. The others didn't ask for expenses. Mr. Hartung did, but his price, is, as Ms. Summerlin mentioned, was less up front.
What are these then?
What are those?
If they didn't ask for expenses?
No, I'm sorry, if you have to replace.
Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
is what he was talking about. So,
Question?
any questions?
Mike, when you were actually hired as the city attorney, that was through Waters
With-
Group? And
with
wasn't
Chris.
involved in
And it
that?
was, yeah, it was Hartung when he worked for him.
Yeah.
And Todd as well, I
And
believe.
yeah, when Ron
My
Patterson.
recollection is for Ron, Mike, Patterson, Hoffman, and Todd.
Glenn.
And Glenn Brown.
Glenn
Glenn
Brown
Brown.
and Mr.
I
Odom.
didn't know that, so
Yeah.
there's 5.
Mhm.
He knows us pretty well.
Maybe not us, but the city.
Well, us, the city, I'm talking about us, Kerrville, I'm sorry. Us, that was the euphemistic.
He,
I make the motion, we hire part-time with their not-to-exceed price, which he has said is simply expenses up to no more than $21,000. $15,000 base fee, expenses, and the aggregate expenses will not exceed the difference of whatever that is, of 21,000. That's he gave us 2 offers, and that was his alternative. And it's not to exceed, but it's not to exceed in the sense that we only pay expenses at their cost up to, but not more than $6,000 worth of expenses. So that's my motion.
We have a
Second.
motion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, would you raise your hands? Motion carries 5-0. Having said that, Mr. Davis, I know that he asked for a contact person, and I would hope that would be you. And as we mentioned several times, Mr. Andrew did, and we agreed during the meeting that any information, any feedback that he gives will come to all of council, which I believe is pretty standard. And also that we will need his schedule, so council will know in the book, says that the week of November the 28th, he would like to conduct preliminary interviews with Kerrville City Council or other stakeholders. So having said that, that's the week after Thanksgiving. I presume we'll need to call a special meeting for that. And I don't know what we would want to do about the stakeholders at that point. What he suggested, if we do, would be certainly staff, have a meeting with staff. I don't know if your recommendation would be that each one of us recommend some person from the community, or that we schedule that at a later date. But I know Mr. Hartung's expressed that what he'd like to do is have all that information together so that he can build a profile, and he wants to have that draft by the first week of December. So if you would address those several point items.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. We will follow up with Chris and let him know of his selection, and then also work out this timeline and schedule with him. I almost hate to have y'all have a special meeting for this, but we can if it's required and y'all are willing. I think the next action that the council would need to take is decide whether or not you want to appoint some citizens. And what I have heard, just casually talking with you, is that most of you, or all of you, want to do that, to get some citizen input. So I think that that appointment needs to be made, whether we do it at the December regular meeting, which is, I believe, the 13th, isn't it, Brenda?
It's the 13th, yes. But the problem with that, Mr. Davis, is that he wants to develop that, he wants to have that information. He suggested, and maybe you know differently, that he wouldn't need it to do the profile.
I think that he will do what we ask him to do.
Okay.
And
Is
if
there
that,
any chance he could come the 28th?
of November,
Yeah.
I don't know, we'll check with him.
Or the 29th, is that
I'm
untenable?
I got a granddaughter.
Okay.
I bought tickets just between council meetings, and I leave the 28th, the 29th to go to Oregon.
Well, let us work this out with y'all
Okay.
and also with Chris.
Yeah.
We understand we want to go as fast as we can, but
Well, that's his timeline. That's the only reason I said
Right.
it. He wanted to draft a profile. I realize holidays may be
Although
difficult.
one of our other interviewees said the holidays are a very good time to have your advertising out because lots of city managers have time to look.
right.
The process for his interviewing stakeholders wouldn't necessarily have to be in a meeting format, would it?
No, I don't
Would-
think so,
Or
Ms.
for
Sumner.
interviewing
No.
city council members. If we
Right.
knew he were going to be here that November the 28th or December the 7th, whatever was an appropriate day, we could all schedule in when we can be there, right?
Yes.
Slot in
Yes, and those will
that
be
would be legal.
One-on-one meetings.
Right, and I think that's the most helpful to somebody like that anyway, because
And I could actually.
it's one-on-one.
Early Tuesday morning. If have to. Preferred would be Monday the 28th, but I'd fly out of Boston, no, I'd fly out of San Antonio just afternoon, so.
Well, one of
I agree with
the,
Ms. Summerlin. I think-
as I understand, I'm sorry, Mr. Alley.
I agree with Ms. Summerlin. I think one-on-one
Yes.
and not have a scheduled meeting per se. We just schedule with him one-on-one. It's more appropriate.
Okay, and I think that as he proceeds, the first thing he's gonna do is advertise. So you've got a kind of a 30-day period in there in which there's not gonna be much activity. And I suspect that's when he's gonna wanna get with y'all and do the profiling. So.
You think the profiling comes after the advertising? I thought the
No, during, at the
profiling
same
fed
time.
into the advertising.
During the
Right.
same
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Yes.
Good,
But
good.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that we're in a big rush to make those appointments. But if y'all are willing to have a special meeting, we can sure do that. And,
Don, respectfully, I think that's, what he says here, preliminary reviews, I can't read this morning. Kerrville City Council and other stakeholders, week of 28th November, draft of profile to Kerrville, 5 December.
That's what I was saying, that he wanted our input so that he could develop the profile of the city. And I think probably at that time, if he was willing, that's fine with me on the 28th, if we did them individually, if we had meetings throughout the day with him. And also at that time, I think what Ms. Summerlin was saying, that we could bring input, maybe 1 or 2 names. I don't know what he would be willing to do. You could ask him this as far as stakeholders.
Right.
You know, each one of us could bring a couple of names, and if he was willing and thought it was beneficial And if, you know, he agreed that he could call those, and he could do that individually as well.
Mr. Hayes, would that take council action for us to just submit a couple of names or one name each?
Just a reference.
For the committee that he's gonna, or the.
For the
Stakeholders.
Okay.
Okay. We could do
Well,
that without a formal meeting.
You could probably do that this morning, or
Yeah,
agree
in the
that that's
next
the
day or two.
process you want
Right,
to
okay.
use. And again, my point solely is, if his proposed timeline doesn't work out with that, we can change that.
Sure.
That's not cast in stone, so,
But if we can,
you know, if we can make it, that would even be better.
That would be
And,
fine with me. And then he wants to bring it back on the 12th to get consensus on that profile. That's the middle of December, so he's still not sent it out.
and that would, our council meeting would
That's
fit
right.
time with,
Be the
perfectly with
13th.
We
that.
could do that the next
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
And by then, it could be shared, this draft, right? So that if we had
After
that
that.
on the agenda, the public could see it, and if anybody had a huge problem with
Right.
something we're saying, they could stand up and make that known to us.
and then at that point, that'll be on the street.
Right,
As they
right.
said yesterday.
Right,
They'll be advertising fairly quick.
yeah.
Well, if
And
we
that'll
could,
I think that'd be great, let's do it that way.
If any of you other than Mr. Andrew have plans to be out of town or gone or whatever, let us know and we can then work around that. And what I would recommend is that this morning, if y'all want to pick a citizens committee of 2 appointees each, that you go ahead and consider that this morning, and that way, that gives that some legitimacy.
Shall we add that to the motion that Mr. Andrew made? Is it too late to do that, or make a subsequent motion?
I think a
Okay.
second motion probably.
Okay. Well, I move that we bring on the 28th of November 2 names to consider as stakeholders' opinions for the search for the city manager.
So, and then is he also gonna interview staff?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
probably the executive, the core, what we call the core team.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So there's a motion to bring 2 on the 28th?
second.
There's a motion and
We're gonna bring them on the 28th, or we're gonna submit them before the 28th?
no, you'll bring them to him. Isn't that what we discussed to
Don't
Mr.
you think
Hartung?
that kind of pushes his schedule?
'Cause I
If
thought
he
he
knew
might
what
do
they
it
were.
on the
To
28th.
talk with them, you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, if we all submit 2 names, then they set up the appointment with him to come in and meet one-on-one. Isn't that what you're
So
talking about?
submit now? Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Between now and
Next
then.
day.
That's fine, and you
Yeah,
can get
just
it to
if y'all would submit those to me
I
and
got
trust
you.
me to do that, then we
Okay,
can
that's fine.
we'll
Then we-
forward those
Yeah, I
on.
felt like talking
Okay,
about
we
it.
submit to Mr. Davis. We'll amend the motion. We'll submit 2 names to Mr. Davis between now and the 28th.
And I think the people, the names submitted should all be citizens in Kerrville and
Sure.
live in the city.
Absolutely.
To live in
Okay.
the city.
Yes.
For clarification,
Let's redo the motion.
well,
How about that?
please, I'm not, yes, if you would. I think
Can you
would,
withdraw your second motion, Mayor?
I withdraw my second.
Okay, we withdraw the motion.
Make a new motion, just cleaner.
But the motion would be that we each appoint 2 members, submit the names to Mr. Davis as stakeholders who live in the city of Kerrville to be considered as a committee to appoint the city manager.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion. and
Excuse
now-
me.
Wait.
I think we're
Not
just
to
talking
be-
about
Not to be a
develop-
committee to select the city manager, to be interviewed by our
Yes.
profile.
to develop the profile.
Okay,
Right,
you
to
said
help
committee.
develop the profile.
Okay,
I'm in
I'll
the
wait
second.
a minute before.
okay,
Sounds good.
Man, it's a tough motion.
Where did you get that?
Yes, sir.
okay. We have the corrected
I haven't
second,
got the second, though.
I
Are you
second.
seconding?
and
Yes,
Stephen
ma'am.
has the second. All right, we finally have a motion and a second. All in favor? 5-0. Thank you.
We got other business we have before one.
Well, thank you all. We'll get that
Really great people.
rolling.
Okay, I think we understand the process, and we will adjourn at 8:18.
We have coffee and donuts upstairs.